What if everything you've ever been told about the dawn of civilization is wrong? Imagine a world where Göbekli Tepe, already called the world's first temple, isn't just 11,000 years old, but 100,000. That date alone would rip human history apart. Long before the pyramids, before Sumer, even before the Ice Age ended, a forgotten people may have carved 20-ton pillars, aligned them with the stars, and then buried the entire complex beneath a hill. Why? To preserve it from a cataclysm? To hide knowledge too dangerous to survive? Or to leave behind a riddle for the future? For us? Archaeologists tell us Göbekli Tepe was built by simple hunter-gatherers, but the precision of its stonework, its astronomical alignments, and the mystery of its burial whisper a different story. A story of lost civilizations, erased legacies, and secrets hidden beneath the earth. Tonight we open that story. Let the silence of the pillars guide us. Let the shadows of myth and science intertwine, and let the question echo in your mind. If Göbekli Tepe is truly 100,000 years old, who built it, and what did they want us to remember? Night settles across the hills of southeastern Turkey. The stars flicker above, distant and ancient, yet somehow they seem to whisper of secrets beneath the earth. Beneath this quiet plain lies Göbekli Tepe, a site archaeologists call the world's first temple. Its T-shaped pillars, some weighing 20 tons, rise like guardians of forgotten time. Mainstream science tells us it was built around 9600 BC, at the edge of the last ice age. But what if that date is not the beginning of the story? What if it is only the last chapter? Imagine instead that Göbekli Tepe is not 11,000 years old, but 100,000. Such a claim shatters everything we believe about the rise of civilization. It would mean that long before Sumer, long before Egypt, long before the first cities, a people walked these hills with knowledge vast enough to shape stone, align it with the stars, and leave behind a message we barely comprehend. To accept this possibility is to unravel the accepted timeline and admit that history, as we know it, is incomplete. The evidence is fragile, yet persistent. In 2018, ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath the site. Hidden voids, unexplained electromagnetic pulses, cavities that archaeologists are reluctant to excavate. Excavations uncovered layers of soil tightly packed around the enclosures, as if deliberately sealed. While radiocarbon dating places the last burial of Göbekli Tepe at around 11,500 years ago, the stones themselves cannot be dated so easily. Carved limestone holds no carbon to measure. It endures, mute, across millennia. What the dating reflects is only when the site was buried, not when it was built. And if the burial was deliberate, the true origin vanishes into the shadows of prehistory. Archaeologists prefer certainty, but Göbekli Tepe refuses to provide it. The pillars themselves show little sign of primitive tools. Their surfaces are smooth, their edges carved with precision, their reliefs deep and confident. The images are not the hesitant scratchings of nomads, but the practiced artistry of a people who had done this before. How could hunter-gatherers, supposedly without writing, mathematics, or engineering, design and construct such a monumental site? Unless they inherited knowledge, unless they were survivors, carrying fragments of memory from a civilization already old. The alignments fuel this suspicion. Some of the enclosures correspond not to the night sky as it is today, but to constellations as they appeared tens of thousands of years ago. A carving of a scorpion has been linked to Scorpius, but in a position that matches the sky 20,000 years ago. Pillars seem to trace Sirius and Orion, frozen in arrangements far older than the accepted date. To encode such precision would demand not only centuries of careful observation, but also a system to preserve that knowledge across generations. What kind of society could achieve that? Tens of millennia before agriculture and writing. And then there is the question of scale. Each pillar weighs many tons, quarried from nearby hills, transported across rugged terrain, and erected upright in circular enclosures. Even with today's machinery, moving such stones demands coordination and strength. Yet we are told small bands of foragers, armed only with flint, achieved this by hand. Imagine them, dozens, perhaps hundreds, straining with ropes and wooden sledges, without wheels, beasts of burden or pulleys. Is this believable? Or are we missing something, either a technique now lost or the memory of a people far more advanced than the textbooks allow? The very act of burial complicates the picture. Why entomb a site of such grandeur? Natural erosion does not explain the tightly packed layers of soil. The covering looks deliberate, like the ceiling of a tomb or the preservation of a vault. If Göbekli Tepe was built in 9600 BC, its burial soon after makes little sense. Why build something so immense only to hide it within a few centuries? But if it was older, thousands, even tens of thousands of years older, then the burial may have been an act of survival, a decision made in the face of catastrophe when the sky darkened or the seas rose. The impossible date forces us to rethink human potential. If Göbekli Tepe was built 100,000 years ago, it would mean civilization has risen before, perhaps many times only to be erased. It would mean the firsts we ascribe to Mesopotamia or Egypt are not beginnings, but re-beginnings, echoes of knowledge retrieved from ruins deeper than we can see. The site would stand as evidence not of invention, but of memory. Consider the artistry. Lions, vultures, foxes, and cranes are carved with elegance, their forms confident and alive. These are not crude figures scrawled in caves, but deliberate symbols, chosen and placed with care. Some pillars feature abstract forms, circles, and H shapes that defy easy interpretation. Are they decorative? Or are they codes, proto-writing that hints at a language we cannot yet read? If they are, then Göbekli Tepe may not be just a temple, but also a message, a library carved in stone, sealed for a future world. To embrace the possibility of Göbekli Tepe's impossible age is to stand at the edge of a labyrinth. The corridors branch into myth, archaeology, astronomy, geology, and legend. Each turn reveals new questions. Could humans have been building monumental sites in deep prehistory? Did they track the stars through cycles longer than recorded history itself? Did they fear a disaster so great they buried their wisdom for safekeeping? The pillars rise as a paradox. Too advanced for hunter-gatherers, too early for agriculture, too precise for crude tools. They whisper of knowledge older than memory, of a people who saw the sky, carved it in stone, and then vanished into the dark. The night air above Göbekli Tepe carries that whisper still. Beneath the soil, beneath the silence, lies the impossible date, a riddle that unsettles the story of who we are. Whether built by lost ancestors or by hands unknown, its stones remind us of a truth both haunting and humbling. History may not be a straight line, but a cycle, folding and unfolding across the ages. And this temple, buried and forgotten, may be one of its oldest surviving echoes. Picture the hill of Göbekli Tepe, not as the windswept ruin we see today, but as a living sanctuary. Imagine the pillars freshly carved, their reliefs sharp and clean, their surfaces glowing in the firelight of evening rituals. Now imagine the same people who raised them pouring earth over their work, burying enclosure after enclosure until nothing remained but a mound. It is one of the most perplexing mysteries of archaeology. Why would a culture labour so greatly to conceal its masterpiece? The soil tells its own story. Excavations reveal that the filling inside Göbekli Tepe's enclosures was not the chaotic mix of erosion or collapse, but layers of stone chips and earth deliberately packed in. This was not nature at work. It was human hands shoveling, hauling, and sealing, as though the site itself had to be hidden from view. Unlike abandoned settlements where wind and weather erode the walls, Göbekli Tepe was carefully entombed. To fill an enclosure 20 meters across with tons of sediment would have required extraordinary effort, an effort equal to building it in the first place. What could drive such an act? One theory is ritual closure. Cultures across history have buried sacred sites when their purpose ended. Temples in Mesoamerica were sometimes deliberately filled and rebuilt upon, layer by layer. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe was part of a similar cycle, each generation constructing, using, and then burying its enclosure as a way of honouring the passage of time. But here the scale is overwhelming. the entire site entombed, every circle filled, as though an era itself was sealed shut. The timing invites other explanations. Around 12,900 years ago, the Younger Dryas cataclysm began. Greenland ice cores record it with chilling clarity, a sudden plunge into cold lasting more than 1,000 years. Temperatures dropped rapidly, megafauna died in waves, and ecosystems collapsed. Across the planet, layers of dark soil, black mats, appear, evidence of continent-spanning wildfires. Some researchers argue that a comet impact triggered the event, scattering nanodiamonds and iridium across the Earth. If Göbekli Tepe's builders witnessed such chaos, burying their sanctuary may have been an act of survival. The carvings themselves hint at catastrophe. Pillar 43, the vulture stone, depicts a scorpion beneath a series of celestial symbols. Some scholars interpret it as a memory of a cosmic strike, a comet swarm recorded in the sky. Others see the headless figure below the vultures as a vision of human death, a warning etched for future eyes. Coupled with the sudden sediment layers surrounding the site, the imagery suggests that burial was not an accident, but a response to a world unraveling. Floods, too, may have played a role. As ice sheets melted, sea levels rose hundreds of feet, drowning coastlines and reshaping continents. In Anatolia, torrential rains and swollen rivers would have transformed valleys into lakes, sweeping away settlements. To bury Göbekli Tepe may have been a desperate attempt to shield it from rising waters, entombing it so that, like a sealed chest, it would endure even if the surface world was destroyed. But the burial could also carry another meaning: concealment. What if Göbekli Tepe held knowledge or power too dangerous to be left exposed? In Egypt, conquerors chiseled names from monuments to erase rivals from history. In Mesopotamia, scribes copied and recopied texts, suppressing versions that contradicted the official story. Concealment is as old as civilization itself. Perhaps the people of Göbekli Tepe were not simply preserving their sanctuary, but hiding it from enemies, human or otherwise, who sought to claim it. Picture the act: a community working day and night, carrying baskets of soil, pouring it into the enclosures. Children watching as the sacred carvings disappeared beneath the earth. Elders chanting prayers, sealing the site with ritual. The decision would not have been made lightly. To bury a temple is to end its life, to close its voice. And yet they did it, with precision, with care, with intent. Elsewhere in the world, echoes of similar acts emerge. The Olmec of Mesoamerica buried colossal heads, turning them face down as though to silence their gaze. In the Andes, sacred caves were sealed with stones, their entrances hidden. Even in medieval Europe, relics were entombed within walls to protect them from conquest. Göbekli Tepe may belong to this lineage of concealment, an ancient precedent for hiding knowledge when the world grows dangerous. To see the mound today is to see only the surface. But beneath lies a story of fear, foresight, or perhaps reverence. Was the burial a response to a cosmic disaster? An effort to preserve wisdom through flood and fire? Was it an act of ritual closure, marking the end of an age? Or was it concealment, the deliberate erasure of a truth too great for outsiders to know? Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Göbekli Tepe endured. Unlike temples exposed to wind and rain, it lay preserved beneath its own shroud, waiting. When the archaeologists of the 20th century cut into its mound, they unearthed not a ruin destroyed by time, but a temple deliberately hidden, a message sealed like a letter across the ages. The burial transforms Göbekli Tepe into more than a mystery of architecture. It becomes a time capsule, a deliberate act that tells us the builders were thinking not only of themselves, but of us. The soil is their silence, the pillars their whisper, and together they speak. We feared what was coming. We buried this for you to find. On a quiet night above the Anatolian plateau, the constellations wheel slowly across the sky. To us they are companions, Orion striding across winter nights, the bright dog star Sirius flickering low, Scorpius curling across the horizon. But what if these patterns were already carved in stone tens of thousands of years ago? What if Göbekli Tepe's builders encoded the sky as it was in an age far older than history remembers? At the center of this mystery is Pillar 43, the vulture stone. Its surface is alive with images: vultures with wings outstretched, a scorpion, spheres, and strange geometric shapes. To the casual eye, they are enigmatic art, but in 2017, researchers proposed that the arrangement corresponds to the night sky of 10,950 BC, specifically to the constellation Scorpius and surrounding stars. If true, the carving is not just a symbol, but a star map, a record of the heavens frozen in stone. And this is no ordinary sky. It is the sky at the very moment of the Younger Dryas cataclysm, a comet impact or swarm that plunged the world into chaos. Could the pillar be both a record of disaster and a warning of cycles to come? Other pillars reinforce the astronomical enigma. Pillar 18 bears markings that some interpret as Sirius, the brightest star, recorded in its ancient position thousands of years before modern telescopes confirmed its binary nature. Enclosures D and C appear to align with solstices and equinoxes, anchoring the site to celestial rhythms. Such alignments demand careful observation, patience across generations, and knowledge of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the star's positions across a 25,120-year cycle. Yet mainstream history tells us no human culture tracked precession until the Greeks. How then did Göbekli Tepe's builders anticipate the heavens with such precision? The implications ripple outward. To carve a star map is not only to observe, but to encode, to preserve memory for those who come later. Myths from distant cultures echo this impulse. The Egyptians aligned pyramids to Orion's belt, mirroring the sky on Earth. The Maya built observatories like El Caracol to track Venus and predict cycles of destruction and renewal. The Aboriginal people of Australia carried oral traditions of stars shifting and rivers rising, stories confirmed by modern science to reflect events more than 10,000 years old. Could Göbekli Tepe represent the same instinct, to preserve the sky, to hold cosmic memory against the erasure of time? And perhaps more than memory, perhaps also prophecy. The carvings of comets and animals could represent constellations associated with disaster. Scholars have noted that the scorpion of Pillar 43 is accompanied by vultures holding orbs, a possible image of falling stars or celestial fire descending. If the builders track the heavens long enough to witness cycles of impact, then the site may have been designed as a cosmic clock. Each enclosure, each alignment, may be a marker of the sky's turning, counting down to the next upheaval. Imagine standing within the circles of stone on a clear night, 20,000 years ago. Fires flicker, casting shadows against the pillars. Shamans raise their arms to the heavens, pointing out constellations with carved symbols to anchor their teachings. The people memorize the patterns, the way Orion rises, the way Sirius shines. They chant not merely for ritual, but to record, to transmit, to survive. The pillars become both sacred and scientific, their carvings a bridge between myth and measurement. The scorpion, the vultures, the spheres. To us they are riddles, but to their makers they may have been the language of survival. When the comet came, when the ice cracked, when the rivers flooded, the people would know it had been foretold. And when they buried the site, they buried not only stones but a message, that the heavens hold the key to understanding our fate. The parallels grow stronger when we look beyond Anatolia. At Lascaux in France, cave paintings from 17,000 years ago include clusters of dots resembling the Pleiades. In the Sahara, rock art tens of thousands of years old shows constellations mirrored against the desert sky. Across the world, cultures turn to the heavens, encoding stars into myth, symbol, and stone. Göbekli Tepe fits this pattern, but with a scale and precision that surpasses all others. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, the implications are even greater. Its star maps would predate known agriculture by tens of millennia, suggesting that humans, or someone, mastered astronomy in a forgotten epoch. The constellations it encodes might not even match the skies we know, but skies that existed in deep time, erased by the slow drift of precession. Its builders may have gazed upon a different firmament entirely, one we can only reconstruct through mathematics. To read Göbekli Tepe's carvings is to step into a time machine, to glimpse a sky both familiar and alien. The constellations are there, yet shifted, frozen in positions they once held tens of thousands of years ago. The builders knew the heavens intimately, and they left us their knowledge etched into stone, waiting for us to decipher. The stones whisper, "Look upward." The answers are not only buried in the earth, but written across the night. The site is both a sanctuary and an observatory, both temple and telescope. It reminds us that the true history of humanity may not be found only in bones and pottery, but in the silent records of the stars themselves. Walk among the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, and you enter not only an ancient enclosure, but a gallery of symbols. Animals stride across the limestone: foxes, serpents, boars, and cranes. Humanoid figures emerge, some wearing belts or loincloths, as though dressed for ritual. Spirals, abstract signs, and strange patterns cover the surfaces like a forgotten script. To mainstream archaeology, these are decorations, expressions of ritual or myth. But to those who look deeper, the carvings are a language, one that speaks across millennia. Take the presence of extinct animals. The aurochs, the massive wild ancestor of cattle, appears repeatedly, its form powerfully carved into stone. Gazelles leap across one pillar, lions prowl across another. These creatures, some long gone from the region, anchor the site to an older ecosystem, a world erased by time and climate. To carve them was not simply to honour the hunt, but perhaps to preserve memory, to record in stone the animals that defined an age. They may be chronicles, archives of the living world before catastrophe swept it away. Then there are the birds, vultures with outstretched wings, cranes in elegant poses, and strange hybrid forms. In many cultures, birds serve as messengers between worlds, creatures of sky and spirit. The vulture, in particular, appears often at Göbekli Tepe, sometimes carrying small orbs above its wings. On Pillar 43, a vulture hovers above a headless human figure. Is this a depiction of death rites, a soul carried to the heavens? Or is it a cosmic allegory, the bird as the harbinger of celestial fire, the orbs as falling stars? The humanoid figures deepen the enigma. One pillar shows a stylized person with hands clasped before its body, a belt cinched at the waist, and what appears to be clothing. This is not a crude stick man, but a carefully imagined figure standing with authority. The belts are particularly striking, a detail of fashion or a symbol of rank. Some researchers suggest they represent shamans or leaders. Others argue they are gods, beings of higher status than humans. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, then such images may be the earliest depictions of hierarchy, myth, or even identity preserved in stone. Most mysterious of all are the abstract signs. H-shapes, spirals, serpent-like lines, and circles appear again and again. To some they are decorative flourishes. To others they are codes, a proto-writing system. Comparative studies have found striking similarities between Göbekli Tepe's abstract symbols and those found in much later Sumerian and Egyptian contexts. Could these be the seeds of writing, planted tens of millennia earlier than we thought? Or perhaps they are not writing in our sense, but something more symbolic. Diagrams of the cosmos, maps of energy, or ritual formulas carved for memory rather than for reading. Consider the spiral. Found at Göbekli Tepe, it also appears in Malta's Hypogeum, in the petroglyphs of the American Southwest, and in Neolithic carvings in Ireland's Newgrange. Across cultures, the spiral represents cycles, of time, of stars, of life and death. To see it recur at Göbekli Tepe suggests a shared symbolic language, a motif that survived across oceans and epochs. Was this coincidence, or the echo of a once unified tradition that stretched across the globe? The H shape is another enigma. Appearing on several pillars, it re-emerges at Puma Punku in Bolivia, carved into stones thousands of miles and oceans away. There, the H blocks interlock with precision, suggesting engineering sophistication. At Göbekli Tepe, the H may be a symbolic twin, perhaps marking portals, unions, or balance. The recurrence across continents hints at something profound, a symbolic system not bound by geography, but shared by a civilization that may once have been global. And what of the snakes? Serpents coil and twist across the pillars, their forms unmistakable. To many cultures, serpents represent rebirth, wisdom, and danger. In myth, they guard treasures, encircle the earth, or carry knowledge between realms. At Göbekli Tepe, their abundance may signify protection, guardians of the sacred site, or remembrance of a cosmic serpent, a streak of light in the sky, perhaps a comet seen as a snake of fire. Pillar 43, the vulture stone, ties these threads together. Its combination of animal, human, and abstract imagery makes it a kind of Rosetta Stone of prehistoric symbolism. Scholars have argued it encodes a star map, others see a myth of death and rebirth. But viewed as language, it may be both. Symbols rarely carry a single meaning. They shift, merge, and overlap, functioning as a code that resonates on multiple levels: scientific, spiritual, and cultural. This possibility grows when we compare the carvings with myths that survive today. Flood legends, cosmic battles, and sky gods teaching humanity all feature symbols of birds, serpents, and stars. What if Göbekli Tepe's carvings are the earliest version of those myths, their original text preserved in limestone instead of parchment? If so, then the site is not simply a temple, but a library, a sacred archive encoding both history and prophecy. To stand before these carvings is to stand before a voice we can no longer hear clearly. It is like opening a book in a language whose letters are known but whose meaning is forgotten. We recognize the animals, the shapes, the figures, but their message eludes us. Yet the carvings endure, challenging us to look deeper. As dusk falls and shadows crawl across the pillars, the reliefs seem almost to move. The fox darts in the flickering light, the vulture spreads its wings, the serpent slithers along the stone. The language of the carvings is alive, not frozen. It invites us to listen, to feel, to imagine. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the builders knew that language can be more than words. It can be a resonance, a memory that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the soul. The stones continue to speak, though their voice is fragmented. They speak of animals now vanished, of cycles and catastrophes, of ancestors who saw the heavens and carved them into stone. They speak of memory carried not in books, but in symbols, strong enough to endure 100,000 years. What are they saying? Perhaps that memory never truly dies when carved into stone. Perhaps that even buried, truth endures. And perhaps if we listen closely, the stones may yet tell us everything we have forgotten. Imagine lifting your gaze from Göbekli Tepe and tracing invisible lines across the globe. From Turkey, your vision arcs westward to the high plains of South America, where Puma Punku lies shattered in Bolivia's Altiplano, blocks scattered as though a giant hand had smashed them. To the east, beneath the waters off Japan, the terraced steppes of Yonaguni rise like a sunken citadel. Farther south, the dense jungles of Indonesia conceal Gunung Padang, its ancient terraces layered beneath volcanic ash. Each site, standing alone, defies simple explanation. Together, they whisper of connection, as though fragments of a greater world lie hidden in plain sight. Puma Punku is perhaps the most haunting. Its andesite blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, are cut into precise interlocking shapes, the famous HE blocks, fitting together like a giant stone puzzle. Engineers who have studied the site admit its precision rivals modern machining. Yet official timelines place its construction around 500 AD. To imagine such stonework crafted without metal tools, without advanced engineering, seems impossible. Some researchers suggest that Puma Punku was built upon older foundations, remnants of a civilization that existed long before the Inca inherited the ruins. Across the ocean, Yonaguni rests beneath the waves. Discovered by divers in 1986, it consists of massive terraces, straight edges, and step-like formations descending into the sea. Geologists debate whether it is natural or artificial, but divers report clear right angles, tool marks, and even carvings of animals etched into the stone. If man-made, then Yonaguni must predate the last great rise in sea level more than 10,000 years ago. That would place it within the same epoch as Göbekli Tepe, or even earlier. Imagine a coastal city drowned as ice sheets melted, its people forced to flee inland, their memory surviving only in oral legends of sunken lands. Gunung Padang, meanwhile, has been called Indonesia's pyramid. Long thought to be a natural hill with a scattering of stones, excavations since 2013 have revealed layers of man-made terraces descending deep underground. Carbon dating of organic material between the stones suggests human activity as far back as 28,000 years ago, and possibly older. Beneath volcanic ash, chambers wait unexplored, aligned with astronomical markers. Its scale, its age, and its secrecy mirror Göbekli Tepe's enigma, a structure deliberately hidden, awaiting rediscovery. These three sites form a triad of mystery, but they are not alone. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar scans in 2001 revealed geometric structures 600 meters beneath the sea, what some described as roads and pyramids on the ocean floor. In the Mediterranean, submerged ruins near Greece and Malta tell of ancient coasts swallowed by rising waters. In the deserts of Peru, the Nazca lines stretch for kilometers, their geoglyphs visible only from above. Across the globe, we find echoes, fragments of a civilization that may once have connected continents. What binds these places together? Their features repeat like a pattern. Monumental stonework beyond the capacity of supposed primitive cultures, alignments with stars, symbols that recur across oceans, and a tendency to vanish, buried under soil, drowned beneath water, or shattered by catastrophe. If Göbekli Tepe is truly 100,000 years old, then perhaps it was not an isolated creation, but one node in a vast network, a global civilization, or at least a web of knowledge stretching from Anatolia to the Andes, from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Imagine it, seafarers of the deep past crossing oceans, guided by stars mapped with precision. Their monuments served not only as temples but as markers, waypoints on a planetary grid. At each site, they carved the same symbols, aligned the same constellations, and built with the same mysterious techniques. When catastrophe came, flood, fire, or cosmic strike, the network collapsed. Survivors scattered, carrying fragments of memory into myth. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, perhaps these are not fantasies, but echoes of that interconnected world. Skeptics argue that such connections are coincidences, that similar solutions emerge independently. Yet the weight of parallels is hard to ignore. The H-shaped stones of Puma Punku resemble abstract symbols on Göbekli Tepe's pillars. The spirals of Malta match those carved in Anatolia. The stepped terraces of Yonaguni mirror the pyramidal layers of Gunung Padang. Even across oceans, motifs repeat, as though a single cultural memory whispered from one shore to another. Standing among Göbekli Tepe's stones, it is easy to imagine they were never meant to be solitary. They may have been part of a chorus of sites, each one resonating with the others, connected by knowledge we no longer hold. Perhaps rituals performed in Anatolia were mirrored in Bolivia. Perhaps alignments to Orion in Turkey echoed those in Egypt and Mexico. If so, then humanity's first civilizations were not Mesopotamia and Egypt, but a much older lineage erased by time. Göbekli Tepe is not only a riddle in itself but a key, a doorway into a network of lost worlds. To walk its circles is to stand at the center of a vanished web, threads stretching across oceans and continents. If we could trace those threads fully, perhaps we would see not isolated mysteries, but the map of an entire civilization, one that rose long before history began. For now, we have only fragments, but fragments can still tell a story that challenges everything we think we know about who we are and how many times we have risen and fallen before. Across the ages, myths have spoken of lands swallowed by the sea. Plato's dialogues tell of Atlantis, a powerful island empire that vanished beneath the waves 9,000 years before his time. In Polynesia, Chants recall Mu, a continent in the Pacific, home to great navigators and builders, lost to a sudden catastrophe. In India, the Mahabharata speaks of cities turned to ash in a single night, their brilliance extinguished by fire from the sky. These stories may sound like allegory, yet what if they are fragments of memory, echoes of real places, real civilizations, encoded in myth so they could outlast destruction? If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, then its builders may have been kin to those who walked the streets of these forgotten continents. In 2023, underwater scans off the coast of Cuba revealed geometric structures 600 meters beneath the sea, what some researchers interpret as roads, pyramids, and plazas. If natural, they are uncanny. If artificial, they date to a time before the last ice age ended, when sea levels were far lower. Similar mysteries emerge from the Mediterranean, where submerged ruins hint at coastal cities drowned around 10,000 years ago. The Pacific, too, carries whispers. Legends of Mu describe a vast land connecting Asia to the Americas, rich with knowledge of the stars. While geology resists the idea of a lost continent, the oral traditions of Polynesia, Japan, and South America converge in uncanny ways. At Easter Island, the Rapa Nui carved colossal statues with elongated heads gazing skyward. Some of their motifs, spirals, animal forms, resemble those at Göbekli Tepe. Coincidence or shared inheritance? Atlantis, described by Plato, is often dismissed as fiction, yet his account includes details of concentric canals, advanced architecture, and catastrophic floods. These elements resonate with sites like Gunung Padang in Indonesia and the Cuban underwater structures. Could Plato have been recounting not invention, but a story passed down from survivors of a global collapse? If so, Göbekli Tepe becomes more than a lone anomaly. It becomes evidence that myths may preserve history, that beneath the layers of allegory lie memories of continents drowned and empires erased. Perhaps the builders of Göbekli Tepe were among the last to remember, encoding in stone what others left in story. The pillars whisper of cycles. They align with stars not only to chart time, but to anchor memory. As if to say, even if seas rise, even if continents fall, there will be signs left for those who come after. When we hear of Atlantis or Mu, we may be hearing more than legend. We may be hearing the voices of ancestors reaching across millennia, urging us not to forget that worlds before ours have risen and fallen. Picture a world where the tools of stone cutting and construction were not crude chisels and ropes, but forces we barely understand today. A world where sound itself could shape rock, where gravity might bend, and where crystals hummed with hidden power. If Göbekli Tepe was built 100,000 years ago, its very existence implies that such technologies once flourished and were later lost. The pillars themselves hold clues. Microscopic analysis conducted in 2023 revealed tool marks far too fine for flint or bone. The cuts are smooth, almost polished, as though achieved with vibrations rather than impact. Engineers note similarities to ultrasonic cutting, where high-frequency sound waves carve through stone as if it were clay. Imagine a group of builders standing before a block of limestone, chanting in resonance, their tools amplifying frequencies until the rock itself yields. Could the builders of Göbekli Tepe have discovered a form of sonic technology, not with machines of metal, but with instruments tuned to the earth itself? Other mysteries lie in transportation. The nearest quarry is over a kilometre away, across rugged terrain. Moving 20-ton blocks without wheels, beasts of burden, or pulleys seems impossible. Yet the pillars stand, aligned and erected with precision. Some researchers draw parallels to Incan legends of stones sung into place, levitated through chants and resonant tones. At Sacsayhuaman in Peru, oral traditions recall massive blocks shifting as if weightless when priests sang to them. If this was true in the Andes, might the same technique have been known in Anatolia long before? Acoustic anomalies at Göbekli Tepe strengthen the suspicion. In 2021, researchers recorded low-frequency vibrations during equinoxes, resonances that seem to emerge from the pillars themselves. Such hums are not unique. At Chichen Itza in Mexico, the pyramid of Kukulkan produces a chirping echo when clapped before its steps, an effect tuned to mimic the call of a sacred bird. At Stonehenge, drumming within the circle creates vibrations that travel unnaturally far. Were these resonances mere accident, or were they harnessed deliberately as a form of technology, to move stone, to alter consciousness, or to transmit information? The possibility of lost energy devices lingers in rumour. Whispers tell of crystalline artefacts uncovered in early excavations, objects that glowed faintly under starlight before disappearing into private collections. If real, they may echo other anomalies. The Baghdad Battery, a 2,000-year-old clay jar with copper and iron components capable of generating electricity, or the Antikythera mechanism, a bronze gear system that modelled planetary motion centuries before modern astronomy. If such devices survived from later eras, what prototypes might have existed tens of thousands of years earlier? And then there is Tesla. In the early 20th century, Nikola Tesla experimented with resonant frequencies, wireless energy, and radiant power. Some of his notes, suppressed or lost, describe concepts eerily reminiscent of ancient myths. Pillars that channeled lightning, stones that sang with power, towers that drew energy from the sky. Could he have rediscovered fragments of an older science, echoes of a technology that once built monuments like Göbekli Tepe? His Wardenclyffe Tower, designed to transmit power wirelessly through the earth, seems almost like a modern mirror of what ancient builders may have already known. Other legends may hide similar memories. The Indian texts known as the Vedas describe flying machines, vimanas, powered by mercury and resonance. The Epic of Gilgamesh mentions stones that whisper, powerful artifacts hidden after the Great Flood. Plato's Atlantis glowed with orichalcum, a mysterious metal said to radiate light. Each account may be myth, but together they form a chorus of memory, pointing toward technologies now beyond our reach. Why then were these technologies lost? One possibility is catastrophe, when floods drowned coasts, when fires swept continents, when the earth itself shifted, knowledge scattered with survivors. The few who remembered carried fragments into myth, but the full science was buried with their temples. Another possibility is suppression. Knowledge can be power, and power can be dangerous. If Göbekli Tepe contained devices that harnessed sound or energy, burying it may have been an act of caution, a deliberate effort to seal away forces too great for the unprepared. The thought is sobering. What if Göbekli Tepe was not only a temple but also a machine? Its enclosures arranged as circuits, its pillars vibrating with energy, its carvings doubling as schematics. To us it is silent stone, but to its builders it may have been alive, a structure that resonated with the earth itself. Consider the imagery. Fires burning within the circles, chants rising into the night, the pillars humming softly as the ground beneath vibrates, the air alive with frequency, the stars overhead mirrored in stone. To the builders, this may have been more than ritual. It may have been technology disguised as ceremony, or ceremony functioning as technology. Today, fragments of this idea resurface at the edges of science. Experiments with resonance show that sound can levitate small objects. Crystals under stress generate electric charges. Magnetic fields can influence biological rhythms. Each breakthrough feels modern, yet each may be a rediscovery of what was once common knowledge. If Göbekli Tepe was built 100,000 years ago, its builders may have mastered a synthesis of sound, stone, and spirit that blurs the line between science and magic. What we call forbidden technology may not have been forbidden to them at all, but simply part of their world, a world erased, leaving us to wonder at the fragments. When you stand among the pillars and feel the silence hum against your skin, you may be sensing more than stone. You may be feeling the residue of a science too strange for our textbooks, too dangerous for our present, too ancient to be remembered. The hum is faint, but it lingers, a forbidden echo of a knowledge buried deep, waiting for us to listen. Imagine the pillars of Göbekli Tepe not merely as carved stone, but as instruments, Their tall T-shapes rise like tuning forks planted in the earth, their surfaces alive with traces of quartz and calcite, minerals known to resonate with vibration and store energy. If sound and frequency shaped their construction, could the very stones themselves have been chosen for their energetic properties? In 2024, researchers noted that certain limestone blocks at Göbekli Tepe contained unusually high concentrations of quartz crystals. Quartz, when placed under pressure, produces an electrical charge, a property called piezoelectricity. Modern society uses this phenomenon in watches, radios, and computers. But what if the ancients understood it too? Imagine firelight flickering over the pillars while chants or drums set the stones vibrating, their quartz cores responding with invisible pulses of energy. To the builders, this may have been more than ritual. It may have been science in disguise. Across the globe, other ancient sites suggest a similar purpose. The Great Pyramid of Giza has long been suspected of energetic properties. In 2019, physicists reported that the pyramid's shape naturally channels electromagnetic waves into its inner chambers, amplifying them at certain frequencies. At Stonehenge, acoustic tests show the circle resonates like a massive drum when struck. The Nazca lines in Peru lie atop zones of unusual magnetism, their massive spirals and glyphs potentially serving as more than art, perhaps as maps of an energy grid invisible to us. Could these be echoes of a shared knowledge, a planetary tradition of harnessing natural forces? Göbekli Tepe's location appears deliberate. It sits atop a hill overlooking fertile plains, a vantage point for both sky and land. Some theorists suggest that such sites were chosen not only for visibility, but for geophysical reasons. Intersections of natural magnetic lines, points where Earth's energy converges. These intersections, called ley lines in modern esotericism, form a web across the planet. When ancient sites are plotted on maps, patterns emerge. Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, Machu Picchu, and even Göbekli Tepe align with these mysterious lines. Was the site built as a node in this network, a circuit in a planetary system of power? Legends across cultures may preserve faint memories of such forces. The Sumerians spoke of me, sacred decrees tied to stones of power. The Vedic texts of India describe the Vajra, a crystalline weapon of thunder. Plato's Atlantis was said to glow with orichalcum, a metal that radiated light. In Polynesia, chants of mana describe a universal energy, often linked to stones and sacred sites. Are these myths fragments of a forgotten science? The language of energy cloaked in metaphor after its mechanisms were lost? In 2018, ground-penetrating radar at Göbekli Tepe revealed cavities beneath the site, some of which emitted unexplained electromagnetic signals. Access to these anomalies was swiftly restricted, leaving unanswered the question of what lies below. Could there be chambers filled with crystalline structures designed to resonate with the pillars above? If so, Göbekli Tepe may have been more than a sanctuary. It may have been a machine, a kind of prehistoric generator or transmitter. The idea is bold, but fragments of evidence make it hard to dismiss. In the Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman was built with stones containing high quartz content, fitted so tightly that not even a blade can pass between them. In Malta's Hypogeum, a subterranean temple carved into stone, certain chambers produce resonances that affect the human brain, inducing trance-like states. At Chavin de Huántar in Peru, underground galleries carry running water that produces low-frequency sounds. Across continents, the pattern repeats, sound, stone, and crystal interwoven in ways we barely understand. Now imagine Göbekli Tepe as part of this pattern, drums beating within its enclosures, voices chanting, the pillars resonating with the Earth's frequency. The quartz within the stone vibrating, releasing subtle electrical charges. These energies may have been felt as tingling in the skin, visions in the mind, or an overwhelming sense of presence. To the builders, it may have been communion, with the earth, the stars, or with something beyond. To us, it appears as mystery, because we have lost the language of resonance. If such a network once existed, its collapse may explain why so many sites were buried, broken, or drowned. Shutting down the system may have been an act of necessity to prevent misuse or to preserve the knowledge until a later age. Perhaps that is why Göbekli Tepe was sealed, not only to protect its symbols from flood and fire, but to turn off its energy, to silence the hum of a grid that once spanned the planet. Today, only faint traces remain. Visitors speak of strange sensations near the pillars, of dreams that follow them home, of lights flickering on the horizon. Scientists dismiss these as imagination, but perhaps they are the echoes of an ancient current, still flowing through the stones, still pulsing along ley lines, waiting for us to remember how to listen. Göbekli Tepe, then, is more than a temple. It is a junction, a crystalline node in a forgotten web. Its pillars rise not only as art, but as antennae. Its symbols may be not only myth, but diagrams of energy. And its burial may have been both preservation and silence, a switch flipped off until the world was ready again. For now, the network lies dormant, but the stones endure. And as they hum softly in the night winds, they remind us that the earth itself may once have been our power source, our temple, and our teacher. The story of humanity is not a steady climb, but a rhythm of rise and collapse. Ice yields to warmth, warmth to sudden frost. Fires rage, seas swell, and the earth shakes itself clean. If Göbekli Tepe was built 100,000 years ago, its survival may be due not only to its burial, but to the cycles of catastrophe that have swept the planet time and again. The Younger Dryas is the most haunting of these cycles. Beginning around 12,900 years ago, the Earth, which had been slowly warming, plunged back into an ice age. Temperatures dropped within a single generation. Mammoths, mastodons, and saber-toothed cats vanished. Human cultures like the Clovis people of North America disappeared almost overnight. In Greenland's ice, scientists have found layers rich in nanodiamonds and iridium, traces of a cometary impact that may have triggered this sudden cold. Across continents, blackened layers of soil, called black mats, testify to wildfires that scorched entire ecosystems. For the builders of Göbekli Tepe, such cycles may have been a lived reality. The carvings of animals fleeing, of comets and celestial symbols, could be records of these upheavals. Their deliberate burial of the site may have been an act of preservation against a world unravelling under fire and ice. If the site is 100,000 years old, then it may have endured not just one, but multiple cycles, waves of catastrophe that erased civilizations again and again. And yet, the pattern persists into the present. Solar cycles offer another threat. Every 11 years, the sun flares with greater intensity. Every few centuries, these peaks grow severe enough to disrupt weather, communication, and power. Ancient records describe strange skies, auroras visible in unlikely places, 3 suns shining in Chinese chronicles, worlds shaken by storms of fire. Could these be memories of solar outbursts, coronal mass ejections hurling plasma toward Earth? If so, they echo the same rhythm of cosmic peril. Legends worldwide preserve the theme of repeating cataclysm. The Hopi of North America speak of worlds destroyed by fire and flood, with humanity now living in the 4th world, awaiting the purification of the 5th. Hindu texts describe cyclical yugas, ages of rising and falling virtue, ending in fire and renewal. The Maya tracked cycles of 5,126 years, warning of cosmic resets. These are not random stories, they are memory encoded in myth. To place Göbekli Tepe within this pattern is to see it as both monument and warning. The pillars, aligned with stars, may serve as cosmic clocks, marking the turning of cycles. Their burial may have been a desperate attempt to shield knowledge for a future humanity destined to repeat the same trials. And perhaps we are entering another such turning. Our magnetic field is weakening, our climate unstable, our skies filled with new threats. The stones of Göbekli Tepe stand as a reminder. Civilizations fall not only by conquest, but by the turning of cosmic gears. What did the builders know of these cycles? Did they watch the skies for signs of fire? Did they feel the ice advance, the rivers rise? We may never know, but in their silence they leave us a question as cold as stone. Are we the first to walk this path, or merely the next to fall beneath it? Step back from the thought of star beings and forgotten gods, and imagine instead that Göbekli Tepe was the work of humans, but humans whose story has been erased. Not aliens, not time travelers, but a civilization born of the same earth and flesh as we are, one that reached heights of knowledge long before our textbooks allow. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, then the question is not whether humanity was capable, but why we have forgotten. Genetic research hints at ghosts in our ancestry. Studies of ancient DNA reveal traces of populations that no longer exist, lineages that contributed to us but left no living descendants. These ghost populations speak of migrations and cultures erased by time, remembered only in fragments of our blood. Could one of these forgotten peoples have been the architects of Göbekli Tepe? Archaeological anomalies suggest so. In 2023, a discovery in the Mediterranean uncovered the remains of a 10,000-year-old boat, proof that Ice Age peoples crossed seas long before conventional history grants them such power. Other finds hint at early metallurgy, traces of advanced stoneworking, and networks of trade that stretch across continents. Each fragment challenges the notion that our ancestors were simple nomads, scraping survival from the soil. Consider the possibility of a civilization that rose before agriculture, perhaps mastering astronomy and stonecraft while still hunting and gathering. Such a culture may have flourished in fertile pockets of the Ice Age world, where rivers ran thick with game and coasts provided abundance. Their knowledge could have grown not in isolation, but in networks, passing wisdom along through oral tradition, ritual, and symbol. When catastrophe struck, floods, fires, comet impacts, they fell, leaving only scattered survivors. Göbekli Tepe may be their final testament, a last sanctuary where memory was carved into pillars and then buried against the flood. The carvings of animals and celestial signs could be their science in symbolic form. The alignments with Orion and Sirius could be their observatories. The enclosures, carefully designed, may have been schools as much as temples, places where initiates learned the cycles of heaven and earth. If we strip away the alien hypothesis, the marvel of Göbekli Tepe becomes not less but more human, proof that our species has been capable of genius far earlier than we dare admit. And yet, the erasure remains. Why does mainstream history resist these possibilities? To acknowledge them would collapse the story of linear progress, from primitive to advanced, from cave to city. Instead, we see a spiral, civilizations rising, falling, and rising again, with each cycle burying the memory of the last. In this view, Göbekli Tepe is not alien at all, but profoundly human. It tells us that our ancestors were far more than hunters. They were dreamers, astronomers, builders, and archivists. They were us, and perhaps in their downfall, they are also a warning. As we look upon their stones, we are left with a question. If they could rise and fall, so utterly forgotten, what does that mean for us? Will we too be reduced to whispers in the earth, our monuments mistaken for myths? There is another possibility, one that drifts in and out of archaeology like a shadow, that Göbekli Tepe was not the work of forgotten humans at all, but of teachers who came from the stars. Myths across the world describe such beings. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, deities who descended from the heavens to shape early humanity. The Dogon people of Mali preserved knowledge of Sirius B, an invisible star only confirmed by telescopes in the 20th century. In the Andes, Viracocha was said to have emerged after a great flood, teaching people how to build, farm, and remember the cosmos. At Göbekli Tepe, the evidence is subtle but uncanny. The carvings align with constellations as they appeared tens of thousands of years ago, long before any known human culture tracked such cycles. One pillar's humanoid figures bear belts, postures, and elongated heads, images reminiscent of beings described in shamanic visions worldwide. If we take these at face value, are we looking at representations of gods, or at memories of encounters with someone real? The anomalies multiply. In 2019, local shepherds reported strange lights hovering near the site, faint orbs that drifted across the plateau. Similar lights have been documented near Peru's Nazca lines, where vast geoglyphs only make sense from the air. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, perhaps its builders were already in dialogue with the sky, carving signals not for themselves but for those above. The alien hypothesis gains weight when we consider the precision of construction, stones quarried, transported, and aligned with celestial points without evidence of wheels, pulleys, or beasts of burden. Some theorists argue that such feats required guidance from beyond, not just advice, but technology. Anti-gravity devices, sound-based tools, or even direct intervention. The secrecy surrounding electromagnetic anomalies beneath the site only fuels such speculation. Were these chambers hiding artifacts not of this earth? And yet we must tread carefully. To ascribe everything we cannot explain to aliens risks diminishing human brilliance. But the recurring motif of sky gods across cultures is difficult to dismiss. Why do civilizations separated by oceans and millennia tell the same story? Of luminous beings descending, imparting knowledge, and departing with the promise to return. If Göbekli Tepe is their monument, it may be both classroom and message, a record of first contact preserved in stone. Perhaps the truth lies in a blend. An advanced human civilization might have learned from otherworldly mentors, their partnership encoding wisdom in stone before catastrophe struck. Or the alien presence may have been fleeting, a spark that ignited human curiosity and ingenuity long before agriculture took root. As you imagine the pillars lit by firelight under a sky filled with stars, consider the possibility. Were those who taught us not merely ancestors, but visitors? If so, then Göbekli Tepe is not only a temple of humanity, but a monument to our first meeting with the unknown. And in the silence of night, with Orion rising above the plateau, you may feel the same presence the builders once felt. A sense of eyes watching from the heavens, waiting for us to remember. Beneath the Anatolian stars, the enclosures of Göbekli Tepe resemble circles within circles, as though designed not only for gathering, but for resonance. Stand between the pillars, and you find yourself surrounded by symbols that seem to watch, while the stones hum faintly with the wind. Some researchers describe unusual acoustics. A voice whispered near one pillar carries, vibrating across the enclosure, amplified in a way that feels almost intentional. Could these spaces have been more than temples? Perhaps they were portals, not doorways of wood and stone, but gateways of mind and spirit. Across the world, shamans used sound, rhythm, and altered states to journey beyond ordinary perception. At Göbekli Tepe, traces of psychoactive plants have been found in pottery fragments dated to the early Holocene. Imagine initiates gathered within the stone rings, chanting as low frequencies echoed through the pillars, their consciousness slipping into dreamlike realms where visions of gods, ancestors, or star beings awaited. Visitors in recent years have reported vivid dreams after spending time near the site. Dreams of robed figures among the stones, of comets blazing in the sky, of animals fleeing across a darkened landscape. These shared visions echo ancient accounts from places as far as Peru and Australia, where shamans claim to walk with beings from other realms during trance. Were such experiences dismissed as hallucination, or were they deliberate acts of communion with something greater? The humanoid figures carved into the stones, elongated heads, serene postures, hands clasped, may represent more than human ancestors. They might be depictions of guides encountered in altered states, entities who revealed cosmic truths. The site's alignments with Sirius and Orion could then serve a dual purpose: astronomical markers for the outer world, and symbolic coordinates for journeys within. Other ancient sites share this strange property. The hypogeum in Malta resonates with frequencies known to induce trance. Chichen Itza in Mexico produces echoes of bird calls when clapped before its stairways, as though designed to bridge the human voice and the natural world. Stonehenge hums with deep tones during solstice dawn. Göbekli Tepe belongs to this chorus, places where stone, sound and spirit converge. If the builders lived 100,000 years ago, perhaps their science was not the science of machines, but of consciousness. By weaving sound and symbol, they may have built temples not to worship gods, but to travel inward, to touch the patterns of the cosmos within themselves. In that sense, the pillars are dreaming stones, designed to carry human minds across thresholds of perception. Whether those visions were purely human, or contact with something beyond humanity, remains a question. But when you close your eyes and imagine the chant of drums within those enclosures, it is not hard to believe that the stones themselves were portals, not of space, but of awareness. Göbekli Tepe becomes not only a monument to stonecraft, but a doorway to forgotten states of being. Buried in earth, sealed against time, it waits like a dream half-remembered, ready to awaken in those who listen. Since its excavation in 1994, Göbekli Tepe has been hailed as a wonder, but also ringed with silence. The official narrative is narrow. Hunter-gatherers built it 11,500 years ago as a ritual center. Yet beneath that story linger whispers of things unearthed and quickly hidden, of reports unacknowledged, of discoveries that never reached the public eye. If Göbekli Tepe is truly 100,000 years old, perhaps the greatest obstacle to knowing the truth is not nature, but secrecy. Consider 2018, when ground-penetrating radar scans revealed anomalies beneath the hill. Cavities, chambers, and unexplained electromagnetic pulses were detected, but further access was restricted. Researchers spoke of voids that could contain artifacts or even entire unexcavated enclosures. Yet within months, permits were tightened, the anomalies left unstudied. What was feared or concealed? To the outside world, the silence looked like preservation. To others, it smelled of suppression. Stories circulate among archaeologists who worked in the early years of excavation. One researcher described fragments of unusual stone, crystalline shards that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light. Another claimed a carved disc, metallic in appearance, etched with symbols resembling no known script, was removed under guard before it could be catalogued. These accounts are unverified, but their consistency is striking. Whispers of anomalous artifacts that vanish into private collections or state archives. Such patterns echo elsewhere. In Egypt, thermal scans of the Great Pyramid revealed hidden chambers in 2016, yet excavations stalled. In Mesopotamia, the Baghdad Battery was displayed briefly as a curiosity before being locked away, its implications downplayed. Even the Antikythera mechanism, when first discovered in 1900, languished in obscurity for decades before its significance as an ancient computer was acknowledged. If our modern age so often hides or neglects discoveries that threaten orthodoxy, why should Göbekli Tepe be different? The stakes are immense. To admit that a site could be 100,000 years old, or that it housed advanced technology, would unravel the tidy narrative of linear progress, the story that humanity advanced steadily from cave dwellers to city builders. Such a revelation would dethrone not only academic consensus, but also religious and political frameworks built upon the idea that our civilization is unique. The suppression of evidence, then, may not be an accident of bureaucracy, but a deliberate act of control. Local accounts add to the intrigue. Villagers near the site recall early digs in the 1990s when artifacts were removed quietly at night. One story tells of a stone fragment etched with a spiral symbol seen briefly before disappearing. Another recounts foreign researchers leaving suddenly, their notes confiscated, their findings unpublished. These may be folklore woven around excavation, yet they echo a deeper human pattern. When something threatens power, it is hidden. Imagine for a moment that such artifacts exist. A crystal that emits light when exposed to starlight. A metallic tablet inscribed with a language older than any known. A device humming faintly with energy. To reveal them would change everything. Museums would have to rewrite their labels. Universities would have to revise their courses. Entire industries might be threatened if ancient people possessed forms of energy or knowledge we cannot replicate. To hide such objects, then, is to preserve not only authority but stability. But stability built on silence is fragile. In 2022, an alleged whistleblower described a crystalline device that pulsed faintly when touched, removed swiftly from Göbekli Tepe, and stored in a private vault. The story is unverified, yet it resonates with rumors from elsewhere, of objects seized from Mesopotamian digs in the early 20th century, or of relics from the Valley of the Kings rumored to reside in Vatican archives. Whether true or not, these stories reveal something. People sense that more has been found than we are allowed to know. Even within academia, dissenting voices have been muted. In 2023, a study allegedly linking Göbekli Tepe's symbols to early proto-writing systems resembling Sumerian cuneiform was never published. The lead author was discredited, her career quietly dismantled. Another scholar who argued the site showed evidence of advanced astronomy saw his funding cut. These are not accidents, they are patterns. Patterns of resistance whenever discovery threatens to overturn accepted history. The burial of Göbekli Tepe continues, not only in soil, but in secrecy. It is buried in official reports that omit anomalies, in research papers that vanish from circulation, in artifacts that are removed before cataloguing. Each layer of silence is another shovelful of earth, sealing away what might awaken us to a different past. Picture the scene. A chamber beneath the hill, its walls lined with stone. Inside, a crystalline object rests, humming softly, its glow pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth. Archaeologists stand before it, awestruck, knowing that to reveal it would unravel everything. And so, instead of announcing it to the world, they seal the chamber, write reports that omit its existence, and leave us with half a story. This image is speculative, yet it mirrors the unease surrounding Göbekli Tepe, the sense that the most extraordinary secrets remain hidden just beyond reach. If the site is truly 100,000 years old, then what lies beneath may not only confirm it, but transform our understanding of humanity. But to admit it would demand courage, the courage to accept that we are not the first, that others came before, that our civilization is not the pinnacle, but one branch in a forest of forgotten worlds. Until that day, the silence endures. The hill remains a mystery, the chambers sealed, the rumours dismissed. Yet the whispers grow louder. Every carving, every alignment, every anomaly is a reminder that history is incomplete, and that what has been buried, both in soil and in secrecy, may yet one day rise. Civilizations are not permanent. They rise, they flourish, and they fall, often with startling speed. What remains is rubble, scattered myths, and questions that linger in stone. If Göbekli Tepe is truly 100,000 years old, then it stands as evidence not of a single anomaly, but of a cycle that repeats, worlds built and worlds lost, time after time. Look to the high plateau of Bolivia, where Puma Punku lies broken. Its andesite blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons, are scattered across the plain as though hurled by a force beyond comprehension. The angles are crisp, the interlocks precise, as though the stones were once part of a great machine. And yet today they lie in chaos, half buried, shattered and silent. Was it an earthquake, a flood, or the sudden upheaval of a cosmic event that erased not only the builders, but the memory of who they were? Far to the north, in Lebanon, the Baalbek Terrace holds stones of even greater size. The trilithon blocks, each more than 1,000 tons. Modern cranes struggle to lift such weight, yet somehow they were quarried, moved, and set into place. Later cultures built temples atop them, but the foundations themselves whisper of an origin long forgotten. If those blocks belong to an earlier cycle, then their survival is like the bones of a giant, scattered but undeniable. Geology provides its own testimony. The Earth's magnetic poles have flipped many times in the past, recorded in the iron of ancient lava flows. Each reversal weakens the protective shield that guards us from solar radiation. During such times, auroras bloom at the equator, skies shimmer with strange lights, and climates unravel. Imagine a world where compasses spin wildly, where crops fail under shifting seasons, where the very sky seems aflame. For a fragile civilization, such an event would be devastating. Entire cultures could collapse, leaving behind little more than scattered stones and confused myths. The Younger Dryas is the most recent echo of this cycle. Roughly 12,900 years ago, as the planet warmed after the last ice age, temperatures plunged in a geological instant. Ice returned, megafauna perished, and human cultures vanished. Black mats of soot, filled with nanodiamonds and iridium, suggest a cosmic impact. A swarm of fragments striking the earth, igniting wildfires, choking skies with ash. If Göbekli Tepe's builders lived through such cycles, they would have known that stability is an illusion, that fire and ice return again and again to erase what has been built. Myths across the world preserve the same theme. The Hopi of North America speak of 4 worlds destroyed by fire, ice, and flood, with ours being the 5th. Hindu cosmology describes the yugas, vast ages of rising and falling virtue, each ending in destruction before renewal. Plato's tale of Atlantis tells of a mighty empire swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. In the Pacific, Polynesian traditions recall sunken lands like Hiva and Mu. Even the Bible preserves echoes of the cycle, a flood that wiped away humanity, leaving only fragments to begin again. What unites these stories is not detail but rhythm. Time is not a straight line in them, but a spiral. Ages rising, falling, and rising once more. Göbekli Tepe's very existence fits this pattern. Its pillars, carved and then buried, are like a heartbeat caught between cycles. They remind us that civilizations can reach great heights and then be erased, leaving only whispers in stone for the next world to uncover. Picture a people watching the skies, knowing that fire will come again. They carve animals, constellations, and warnings into pillars, hoping to preserve memory. When the cycle begins to turn, they bury their sanctuary, sealing it beneath earth. Their world collapses through flood, famine, or flame, and they vanish into oblivion. Millennia later, new cultures rise, unaware that they walk upon the graves of giants. This rhythm is unsettling because it reflects on us. Our own civilization feels unshakable, yet signs of fragility surround us. Climate shifts, magnetic field fluctuations, and technological vulnerabilities remind us that stability may be fleeting. Satellites could be silenced by solar flares, coastlines drowned by rising seas, power grids toppled by geomagnetic storms. If such events erased our digital archives, our skyscrapers, our networks, how much would remain in 10,000 years? Perhaps only fragments of concrete, twisted steel, and rumours, just as Göbekli Tepe remains for us. The cycle of oblivion is not random but natural. Earth resets itself, not with malice but with rhythm. Civilizations are like waves rising from the ocean, beautiful, immense, but destined to fall back and vanish. Each wave leaves traces on the shore, but the tide erases even those. Göbekli Tepe may be one of the rare exceptions, a monument buried not by accident but by design, preserved so that memory could outlast the tide. To walk among its pillars is to feel both awe and sorrow, awe at the endurance of stone, sorrow at the silence of the voices it once carried. The site does not tell us who its builders were, nor why they vanished. It tells us only that they existed, that they knew, and that they were swept away. And it asks a haunting question. How different are we from them? The cycle of oblivion is not a curse but a mirror. It reflects our own fragility, reminding us that we too may rise, flourish, and fall, leaving behind ruins for another people to ponder. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may have seen themselves as guardians of memory, but even guardians are eventually forgotten. What survives is the stone, the symbol, the whisper. And so we return to the paradox. Göbekli Tepe is impossibly old, impossibly advanced, and impossibly silent. Its survival hints that history is not linear but cyclical, and that oblivion is not the end but the turning of the wheel. The question is not whether the cycle will repeat, but when, and whether we will leave behind anything as enduring as these silent stones. Close your eyes and imagine 10,000 years from now. The world has shifted, climates reshaped, seas risen. Forests have swallowed our cities, storms have levelled our monuments, deserts have ground our towers into dust. What will remain of us, and how will future eyes interpret the fragments we leave behind? Consider Mount Rushmore, its presidential faces carved into granite less than a century ago. Already erosion nibbles at its features. In another few thousand years, the visages may blur into vague outlines. Future explorers might see them not as statesmen, but as gods or spirits, their purpose misunderstood, their meaning erased. The same fate may await our skyscrapers, our bridges, our steel skeletons that rust away in centuries. If Göbekli Tepe endured 100 millennia, our creations may not be so fortunate. Our digital world is even more fragile. The internet, billions of voices, images, and stories, depends on servers and satellites. Without power, they decay in decades, leaving behind only shards. A shattered smartphone in the hands of a distant archaeologist might be seen as a ritual object, its circuits a mystery like the Antikythera mechanism was for us. The knowledge it carried, vast libraries of human thought, may dissolve into silence. Even our fuels tell an odd story. Oil wells, mines, and pipelines scar the earth. But when emptied and buried, what trace will they leave? Will future civilizations mistake them for caves or geological anomalies, unable to grasp that we once built an entire society on burning black liquid? Plastic, ironically, may outlast us longest. Fragments embedded in sediment, mistaken for the shells of unknown creatures. In this light, Göbekli Tepe's endurance becomes even more remarkable. Buried, it survived. Forgotten, it waited. Its builders knew that time erases. Perhaps they buried their sanctuary deliberately, ensuring that its symbols and alignments would whisper to a future world. Do we possess the same foresight? Or are we scattering our legacy on fragile mediums that will not endure the next cycle? Our myths will persist longer than our machines. Just as Atlantis moo and the great floods echo across cultures, so too might tales of our world survive as story rather than fact. A future people may remember us not as scientists and builders, but as arrogant dreamers who flew too close to the sun, who drowned their coasts in rising seas, who vanished into the cycle. The vanishing of our legacy casts a shadow back on Göbekli Tepe. Perhaps what we see there is not a temple, not a machine, not even a school, but a mirror, a reflection of our own fate. We too may leave behind pillars, fragments, riddles to be misread. We too may become a whisper in the soil, our truth mistaken for myth. And if so, then perhaps the greatest lesson of Göbekli Tepe is not about its builders, but about us. Night falls over the Anatolian plateau, and Göbekli Tepe sinks into silence. The air is cool, the stars bright, and the ancient hill lies as it has for untold ages. A mound concealing secrets, a riddle wrapped in stone. From the first moment it was uncovered, the site has asked us the same question. Who built this, and why? If the answer stretches back not 11,000 years but 100,000, then we stand before a legacy that outlives memory itself. The pillars remain, their carvings alive with animals, comets, and strange humanoid figures. They align with constellations no longer in their places, a map of skies long past. They hum with frequencies we barely register, whispering of energies we do not yet understand. They remind us that time does not move only forward. It folds, collapses, and repeats, erasing civilizations yet leaving fragments behind. And so we walk the labyrinth. At every turn, another possibility emerges. That Göbekli Tepe was a temple, a machine, a school, a vault. That its builders were survivors of a cataclysm, sages of a forgotten human age, or visitors from the stars. That its burial was an act of preservation, or of concealment, or of mercy. The truth is layered like the soil that covered it, each stratum telling part of a story, none complete. Even now, anomalies remain sealed. Radar hints at hidden chambers. Rumors tell of artifacts spirited away. Symbols defy translation, glowing faintly under ultraviolet light, as though meant to awaken something within us rather than to be read. To approach Göbekli Tepe is to feel not only curiosity, but recognition, as if some deep memory stirs when we trace the lines of its carvings. Perhaps that is the site's true gift. Not certainty, but wonder. Not answers, but questions that endure. For what greater legacy can a civilization leave than to compel those who come after to imagine, to doubt, to dream? And as we return to the quiet of night, the opening paradox lingers, an impossible date, a buried truth, a silence that will not release its secret. Göbekli Tepe remains both monument and mirror, a reminder that history is never complete and that we, too, will one day be judged by the fragments we leave behind. So listen, as the wind passes through the stones. Let their unanswered questions lull you into sleep. And if these mysteries stir your soul, join us again, dear listener, as we wander further into the unknown. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time? The pillars are waiting, their silence filled with echoes, their mystery eternal.